Welcome back to Finding the Alternative. Here today with me is Han, and I'm going to turn the time over to him so he can introduce himself a little bit, kind of give you a backstory of his situation, and we'll ask him some questions, and then we'll kind of wrap up after we each share some thoughts about our time in the WMSCOG. So, Han, take it away.
Okay, hi guys. I'm Han Schardinger. I was in the WMSCOG for 21 years since I was born, and I left about 3 years ago. No, maybe 2 or 3 years ago. I'm 23 now, so yeah, that's what I've been up to.
Now, you were born in Korea, right?
Right.
And so you had, growing up till you were about 8, if I remember correctly, you were in the Korean church. Can you talk a little bit about that and what you remember about being in the Korean church?
Yeah, I was born in Daegu, South Korea, and I was there for about 7 years until I was about 7 years old. Um, I actually I didn't know I was in a cult for the longest time, but my parents joined in 1999, right before Y2K. And around that time, there was a lot of fear about doomsday, right? There's Everybody was scared. It was trending, and my mom, she had been reached out to by a current member who's now a deaconess. She got preached to by her, and then my father, who was in the military, in the military base there, he also joined in, but he kind of took off with it. My mom, not so much. She just kind of believed the doctrine and just kind of attended services. But yeah, that's what kind of happened in the beginning.
So your dad's Caucasian, so your dad was basically the first American, it seems like, to be able to be in Korea and be a part of the church, essentially. So he's like one of the first, it
Right.
seems like. Um, so when you were in Korea, did you spend a lot of time with mother or general pastor, or can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So Zangyoja, or God the Mother. I've seen her quite a few times in my life, several times, especially when I was young. I remember as a baby, I would see her at the Bundang Temple. I would go into their meetings and just kind of see what they were talking about. And she'd give me like orange juice and stuff. And, we had like a decently close relationship. I think it's because I kind of stood out, especially with my dad. But
Yeah.
yeah, I've seen her quite a bit. She would go to different branches in Korea and see the kids, and she would come to me and pick me up and stuff. But yeah, she's always felt like a grandmother while I was in.
Right. And there was one time I remember us talking, there was one time where she was handing you some money. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so my father and I are estranged for quite a bit, most of my life, and there was a time when he was struggling to pay child support. Well, there was a lot of times, but she thought it would be a good idea to give him about $5,000 to give to me so that it would make him look good, so he could save face.
With
And
your mom. And
right, with my mom, me, but we didn't find out about that till we went to Korea in 2017, right? And at that time, she had asked us like, "Did you get the money?" And we were very confused, like, "What money?" Right? And I think at that moment I was confused too. Like, this is God. Like, she doesn't know that we
they
didn't get
give
the
you
money.
the
Yeah.
right.
So a lot of questions started going in my head. I was very confused. How could you take the money from God and then not give it for the sole purpose of what she intended? And yeah, she gave us $5,000 more so we could spend it in Korea. And I think she's really good at that. Emotional investments, 5K is nothing for this kind of organization. So yeah,
But to
she
you
really,
and your mom, that's a lot.
Well, yeah, I mean, it felt like, oh, she's really our mother. She's giving us money, like I know a lot of members probably haven't had that experience, but for us, it felt like a very personal connection when she did that.
Yeah, I can imagine. I just think it's funny because thinking back, how I was in the house church and I was running the house church for a minute. I had the house church in my house for quite a few years, but I never got help with rent, power bill,
Yeah.
anything like that. So, and I mean, and you tithe and you offer and food offering and all these things, and it's just hearing you talk about it is kind of mind blowing, actually, because you never think, mother is just going to hand out money like that. Because I never got a dime from the church ever.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that's a lot of. I'm sure I'm kind of the majority of probably people that are listening. I'm sure they've never been handed money. I never went to Korea, so I was never chosen or sent or however that process works. I wasn't good enough to go to Korea. So maybe if I did go to Korea, she'd hand me $5,000. I don't know, right? We could.
Well,
I mean, I would definitely take
yeah. Yeah.
it. Okay, so and you came to the state. Let's see, when you were about 7 or 8, right? That's when you came to
7.
the state. And you are in California, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And how long have you been there the whole time, or were you kind of all over the place in the U.S.?
I've always been in California since we moved here.
Okay. And
Mm-hmm.
when you moved here to the States, was that before or after your dad kind of left?
So he stayed in Korea for quite a bit, and
Okay.
then I think when I was in probably like a year or two after, he was stationed in Kuwait, and
Okay.
we like Skype and stuff during that time. But that's when he really started preaching to like soldiers, in his camp, and um, I think that's when he really got a fervor for it.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it's very interesting because when you think about preaching and how they present preaching, that is honestly the best way to emotionally manipulate people. Because if you think about it, right, they say, oh, this is your family now, like when you're baptized, right? And they say like how bad the world is, right? The world is evil, the world is just chaos and just bad. Everyone's bad, right?
Mm-hmm.
Us good, them bad. And so naturally, when you go and you knock on people's doors and you interrupt their evening or their dinner or whatever, of course you're going to get backlash, right? And you're going to get, when you get kicked out of Target, when you get kicked out of Walmart or whatever, you kind of get that emotional response of like, oh, they're right. I just got kicked out of Walmart. I just got kicked out of Target. Oh, these people are yelling at me. But it's like, no, what they're actually doing is when you're knocking on the door, you're interrupting their meal completely unsolicited,
Mm-hmm.
right? Talking to them about this crazy religion. But in your eyes, you're like, oh, persecution. This must be what they were talking about. So it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. And then when you go back to Zion, right, you have a good time together, you have a meal together, and it's like lovey-dovey. And so that creates that like artificial separation because
Right.
you have outside bad because they put you in these situations where of course you're going to get yelled at. Of course you're going to get persecution or whatever they call it. And then you go back to Zion and you all have, they have the same father, mother, the same message, the same goal, same fervor, and you have meals together and all this. So it really creates that superficial separation.
Mm-hmm.
So if there's people watching, especially family members who may have had people in the church, their family members in the church, that's how they create that separation between everyone and us because they build this nice utopia among themselves, this big echo chamber, and then when they go outside, they get the whirlwind of the world, and then it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy there.
Yeah,
Um,
it's two different worlds,
yeah,
you're in the cult or the church, and you go out and everyone's like, oh, they're ridiculous, what are they talking about? Why are they wearing suits? Why are they, you know
you had
knocking
to
on
preach in suits.
doors? Yeah.
You had to preach in suits. Oh, dang! No, I didn't have to preach in suits, but I
Yeah,
mean, we did dress shirts and slacks, but we never did suits. That's next level.
a lot of people would wear suits too, right after service we would go on a
Oh,
college
true,
campus. Yeah.
true. Okay, so let's kind of walk me through your life of faith. So born in Korea, right? So you were born in the cult. and then you moved to the States, and then you basically stayed there your whole life. Obviously, you went to Zion in the States. What Zion did you go to for a majority of your life? It was Orange County, right?
Yeah, so we started out in Reseda in the LA area, and
Okay.
then slowly we branched out to Garden Grove around the time I was in maybe middle school. And then
Okay.
after Garden Grove, they started branching out to 7 churches in Orange County. And these are like house churches, office churches, and regular churches too. Um, but I was in Brea, which is where I live right now. And
Okay.
we had a house church in the beginning, and then we had an office church. But
Okay.
now they actually moved out because it wasn't doing too well.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's another thing too, right? When they say this church will never fail, right? Like we're preaching the gospel, God's with us, we will never fail. But I mean, in Utah alone, actually, we had to close up quite a few churches over the years as well. So it does happen, believe it or not, in the true church. Churches fail. So take that as you will.
Not according to prophecy. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a but when WSCOG fail, it's not failing. It's just there was other issues, right? It's not really failing. It's just you
So,
learned where to not go, right? But other churches fail.
right.
Anyway, it's that kind of again that separation, that artificial separation from everybody else. But
Mhm.
okay, so you're in Orange County, and so walk me through your teenage years of being and in the church. Like, walk me through your kind of life of faith in your teenage years.
Right. So, you know, up until maybe the age of like 13, I didn't really know what was going on. Never really
Naturally,
thought it was a cult. Um, I just thought maybe we're a little different and we went on Saturday while everybody went on Sunday, you know.
right?
But slowly I started seeing some weird stuff, the commitment of members, the things that they would give up, the priorities like family, school, jobs, selling their own car, you know. And yeah, slowly I started seeing some inconsistencies, but I didn't have much faith, or I didn't really do much until maybe I was around 15 or 16 years old when I was going through some tough stuff. Yeah, in high school. So I tried as hard as I could for maybe about 2 to 3 years while I was in high school, and I was going through a tough time. I was struggling with a lot of personal struggles, and it became my outlet, you know. And obviously, there's members that they're there every day. They clean, they cook, they're all just tired, but I would probably go as much as I could, like maybe Saturdays, Tuesday night, and preach maybe once or twice a week as much as possible.
Okay. And did the church ever try to get you to um, expose the church to like maybe your high school or your schoolmates or stuff? Did you have any seminars in the high school or anything like that? Or
I I had a high school Bible study club.
oh, really?
Yeah, it was something that I was doing because I knew a says was a thing, and I was gonna go to college soon. So I was like, let me practice. Let me get some students together, meet them up in the library, and then at some point we had like a class rented out during lunch where we would also do Bible studies. And I had maybe like 4 or 5 people come to the church, but I had maybe like 7 people in the club at a time.
And for those who don't know, maybe can you explain a little bit what ACES is?
A says stands for saving the earth from A to Z, or sometimes they'll put hidden meaning like Ansang Hong and Zangilja, right? A to Z, or Alpha and Omega, But that is a club on college campuses that they're trying to establish. And what they do is sorry, it's my laundry.
It's all good.
But what they do is they preach to these students. Sometimes they don't even preach right away about God the Mother on Ansang Hong. Sometimes they'll say, hey, we're having an event, a volunteer effort, you should come and, just see what we're all about. And then they'll give you a pamphlet or something. And then students will come like, oh, I want to volunteer. This is good for my resume, or it makes me feel good. But once you get there, right, they slowly, they're like, oh, so have you ever heard about God the Mother? They'll go on that tangent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is ACES part of the church? You know how like they have a distinction between We Love You and Church of God? And I remember doing the We Love You cleanup. So like, don't call each other brother and sister. Don't call each other deacon, missionary. It's just, hi, Han, not brother Han, and I'm Adam, not brother Adam, or something. Is that how it was with ACES, or is ACES part of the church? I actually don't know.
Yeah, it's funny. Like when we're not preaching, but we're just trying to casually bring people into a game night or something like family night or sock drives, those kind of things, right? We use these front groups, right? ACES, what else? We Love You, Ayuba. I'm sure they have much more now, they got to do that to stay under the radar,
Were you part of IUBA? Because that's International University Bible Academy, I think, isn't it?
You're probably right. I don't know much about it. I think it was more prevalent in Korea, and then they were trying to do that here, but I don't know. I have to catch up on their videos.
Yeah. I mean, they have a bunch of groups, right? And not to say that, and it's kind of hard, right? Because of course, volunteer service is good, right? And so it's really hard to be like, oh, like as if volunteer service is bad, right? Volunteer service in and of itself is not bad. It's just maybe the intentions behind said volunteer service is, it's just not straightforward, right? If it was just for the sole purpose of volunteering, right? And just, actually just giving back to the community or serving, cleaning the earth or whatever it may be. But of course, you being in, would you say that that is the sole focus, or what's the sole focus behind the volunteer service?
Sole focus is to lead their souls to Zangyoja and Ansangong.
Right.
All the other stuff is they're good deeds, right? We're supposed to bring them to the church through worldly things, right? So I think that is like the most worldly thing that we would ever do. We're not going to throw concerts or anything like that. I think we have, but like not like the worldly concerts that they refer to,
like orchestra maybe, or some
orchestra.
something like that, or a choir. They might do something like that. Because would you say that, like with the service projects, would you say that it's more about the service or more about the image of the church in your experience?
It's the image. You look at their videos that they show members when they first come, right? They show people of Church of God, and there's videos of like all the volunteer efforts throughout the whole world, right? So it's propaganda. They're making movies so that when people come, right, they don't automatically think, oh, this is a cult, right? They think, oh, look at all the good things that they're doing, right? I want to be a part of that. It's a movement. It really like gets you going, and people like, who wouldn't want to be a part of that, But
yeah, I mean, someone approaches you and is like, hey, do you want to clean the earth, or hey, you want to clean the streets, or hey, you want to feed the homeless, or hey, you want to do a disaster, like help this disaster cleanup. Of course, that appeals to human nature, right? Because most humans, I'll say most, right? Because there's an exception to every rule, but most humans, right? If there's someone in need and they're able to help, I hope 90% of people would want to help. Of course, there might be some situation where they can't, or timing or something, but I think majority of people would want to help. So it appeals to their good nature, right?
Yeah.
But what maybe is not the best is, you're not putting everything up front, right? And I think that's what's wrong with, groups like WMSCOG, as opposed to like, let's say a healthy church, right? Like just a normal Christian church, right? Typically, normal Christian churches, they don't call the news every time they do a food drive, right?
Yeah.
They don't call the news every time they do a cleanup. They don't call the news every time they go visit a retirement center or something like that. They do it, but they I think they take the verse very seriously where Jesus says, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, right? Or if you announce with trumpets, right, what you're doing, that's your reward in full, right? You're not getting anything from your Father in heaven. So I think other Christian churches kind of take that to heart. But I feel like, when they do that, though, I don't think their main purpose, and it could be, right? The other Christian church, maybe their main purpose is to get people into the church. But I think whether it's a Christian church or a WMSCOG or another group, I think if you're going to do volunteer service, make it just be about volunteer service, right?
Yeah.
Like make it about volunteer service. If you want to talk religion, or your main goal is to get them into the church, just say that up front, right? Be like, hey, we're doing this in hopes to get you to the church, right? Because it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Right. So I think all the volunteer efforts, the videos that they make, these are preaching tactics. If when you're a cult, right, you can see like all the other Korean cults, Moonies, JMS, Shincheonji, right?
Mm-hmm.
They hold these huge things in the stadiums, right? They have like
Massive. It's massive.
right, huge weddings together, just elaborate stuff that would make them look like wow, like they're on the radar, like they're doing cool stuff that supports the community, right? But then something interesting that happened recently, right? I'm from California. We had the wildfires,
Right.
got really bad out here. But after a week or two, right, I knew this was gonna happen. They're like, all right, now we're gonna help the victims, right? And they're setting up booths. I think in Riverside, they have a whole tent. And now, this is what makes me sad is that all these people, they lost their homes, right? They lost a lot of money. There's no fire insurance. The WMSCOG knows that, and they're playing on their vulnerability. It's like a low-hanging fruit. And that might seem a little, pessimistic, but that's exactly what they're looking for. They want vulnerable people. And then
Because part of the doctrine is you have to tithe and offer and give donation, and you're paying 20 to 30% of your paycheck every single month to the group. That is part of your salvation.
Right. Yeah. So I'm very worried about these people that they prey on. They make it seem like on the surface it's such a good thing. They're helping them, right? They're using their funds to support the community. But ultimately, over time, if they get indoctrinated, like they're gonna lose a lot more money. They'll lose families, jobs, like
Opportunities.
right. Like it's so sinister how they go about it.
Yeah. And I feel, to add on to your point too, it's just, that's when you just help people, right? You don't have an ulterior motive. In disaster relief, there's no room for you to have an ulterior motive. It's like one thing to just do a cleanup, right? And be like, yeah, our church is doing a cleanup. We're trying to invite people to the church, right? But to do a disaster relief, knowing that you're going to try and get people into the church to take their money and to take their time and all that stuff, that just can't happen, just because, like you were saying, these service projects, even though they spend money on booths and these kind of things, which I'm highly suspecting comes from the members' own pocket. I don't think the church really pays much out for that.
Right.
Maybe, right? But either way, a service project shouldn't become an investment, right? It should become an investment opportunity for the church, especially disaster, right? Okay, so moving on. So you were in the church, you were in high school, and you were basically, it seems like you were a pretty active member, right? Going on the Sabbath, going preaching when you can, doing the walking the walk, if you will. When did you kind of start thinking maybe there's something more to this organization? Maybe there's something more that I want in life, maybe, or like, where was your head out? What was that process of you maybe thinking that this isn't the right path for you?
Right. So it didn't just happen. There wasn't one day where I was just like, I'm walking out of here. I'm never coming back. It was a process. Right. I think during COVID, the lockdown, that's when I really started to feel very distant from the church, which makes sense because you're in that environment all day long, for every week of your life, twice a week. And then suddenly you can't go anymore. You're in your own home. You feel a little lazy to get on the Zoom call every time, spending the whole day on the laptop with them. Like, that's not natural. Um, and I don't think I was walking the walk all the time. I just did what I thought I could do.
Right.
I try to avoid a lot of the studies after service. You're there 9 to 9 and they're like, hey, Han, like, you need to join our Bible study.
Go preaching.
Right.
I'll just be like, after service, usually they have like signature time where they go and they pass off their subjects, or they do an extra preaching session or an extra Bible study or something. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, there's no consideration for, your own time. They want you to spend as much time as possible with them for their cause. Like, I remember this one brother, he started getting Bell's palsy on one side of his face because all he would do was just preach every day,
Gee.
Yeah, I think we were cooking in the kitchen and I made a joke and he started laughing and just one side was happy, one side was just drooping. And I was like, brother, what's going on there? And he's like, I've been preaching every day. I've been waking up 5 a.m. every day for the past week. It's the Pentecost. Like, people, like, they kill their bodies for their soul, right? Like, they always say this in the WMSCOG. What do they say? They say the physical body it's just physical, it's just flesh, but the spirit is strong, and that is how people would get through those, hard times, whether they're sick, or something really bad is going on in their life. They would always motivate themselves with that.
Well, and when things are going bad, they often, the church kind of implants that everything is your fault always, right? Even if it's really not. You kind of take the blame for anything and everything, right? They kind of teach you, isn't it better just to be wrong than to be even for something, right? They kind of say like even if you're accused of something that you didn't do or you're kind of rebuked for no reason, they're like, oh well, it's good for you, it's good for your salvation, you deserve it. I'm a sinner, right? I don't deserve anything. I deserve to be, but it's like, but you really didn't do anything. So it kind of creates this vicious cycle of, a self-destructive, you know, storm that's constantly brewing inside of you, because you like anytime you receive something good, right, they kind of play it down like, oh, you don't deserve it. But then everything that's like bad and terrible that happens, like, oh, you deserve that. So it's just this constant storm of just this self-destructive mindset.
You're never enough in the WMSCOG. Obviously it's good to be humble, but yeah, you're never enough. They'll always tell you, Father's coming tomorrow. He could come tomorrow, he could come next year. It's always, there's always a sense of urgency, and that's how they keep people always, preaching and trying to climb the ranks. And yeah, it's like putting them on a treadmill, like, it never ends.
Even if you bear 10 fruit, right, that's still not enough, right? You have to go preaching the next week.
Yeah.
Or you pass off all your 50 subjects or your 70 subjects, or you do all your edu LMS or whatever, then you have to do it again, right? And then you do it a second time, oh, you have to do it again, because they talk about chewing the cud, which is basically just the same thing over and over and over, just like, like the cows chew the cud and
Right.
all that stuff. So your relationship with your dad in the church, I guess it was basically non-existent, right? Like for at least your memory, you don't really remember him. You never really went to church with him. You never really participated in anything with him related.
I've been to church with him. I haven't seen him since I was maybe 11 or 12. I think
Okay.
that's the last time I met him in person. But no, I've been to church with him. We would go to the temples in Korea, see Mother or Zangyoja, and I've seen him run his own house church in Kentucky. Um, I think he was a deacon at that time, and his new wife, she's a deaconess. So, but yeah, I've seen him at work. You know, I've seen his cult personality and how invested he is in it. But yeah, I've seen it.
Would you say that the church maybe had a hand in the separation between your mom and your dad?
No, I think he was just preaching so much when they first joined, and when they had me, he would just preach constantly, and my mom was just starting to get fed up. You know, like I get that this church is important, but we have a child now. Like we need to take care of the child, and then eventually she's like, I can't do this anymore. You know, and nothing would stop him. He said, no, I got to do this. This is the most important thing in the world. You know.
Would you say your dad is a victim, or would you say your dad is knows what he's doing, that he's basically like non-existent in your life? Or I guess kind of explain, what do you think is going on in your dad's head right now?
So I think he's very deep in it. I think probably one of the deepest. He's now a missionary in the East Coast. Not too sure where, but he started in New Windsor and Ridgewood, as far as I know. And I've been there a couple times, and I've seen him. But yeah, no, he's. I think I don't know. I don't think he knows that it's a cult. I think every part of him wants to believe that it's not, because he spent over 20 years in it. He has a wife in it. He's a missionary. He probably has, you know, probably gives sermons and announces or whatever, you know. So when you're at that point, like there's no going back, you know.
Yeah. And maybe if I could elaborate a little bit too, for family members who have family in the church, to kind of piggyback on what Han is saying, essentially the reason why your family is not part of your life right now is because the church has ingrained in them from early on that, you know, you're not going to understand why. But essentially what is going on is they're taught that the more they spend in the church, the more they serve the church, the more they give the church, essentially you as an unbelieving family member will, in hopes, come to the church and be baptized and be saved and join them, right? Or at the very least, when Ansang Hong comes with, fire and judgment and everything, you as an unbelieving family will be spared by your believing family members in the church, all their effort, all their time giving to the church, all their blessings. Essentially, they're investing their time in the spiritual world now, so that way you as an unbelieving family member can be saved, whether in this life or on the last day, right? That is their whole hope, that is their whole goal. So if your family member in the church is putting you off and it seems to be just doing all church things and not really doing anything with the family anymore or something like that, just know that that is like 99%. I mean, of course, there's an exception to every rule, but I strongly believe that 99% of why that is because they're investing in your salvation by being there at the church, by always preaching, always going to service, putting the church first in every single thing, because they're hoping that one day you will be saved, whether that be coming to the church or, you know, um, being saved on the last day.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so as far as you coming out of the church, what was that process like? When was there a last straw to where you're like, okay, I can deal with the rest of this stuff. I can maybe play all the rest of this off. Was there one thing maybe where you're just like, no, I can't do that anymore. There's a wall here and I'm not gonna go through it.
Right. There's 100 things. that made me want to leave. But I think the last straw, the one that really made me want to really dive deep into exposing, or just seeing the inconsistencies, was one time right before the Passover, the last Passover that I was supposed to keep. um, one of my brothers, one of the closest ones, he called me. He was checking up on tithes and offerings of the members, and he said, "Brother Han, apparently, unfortunately, you didn't tithe last month. So according to the General Assembly, you can't keep Passover, right? But your mom can, but you can't keep Passover." And I'm like, that's a death sentence, you know. But he said it so nonchalant. He's like, God said you can't, so you can't. And I was like, you're killing me, you know. But yeah, that shocked me, because I'm like, I've been in the church so long, since I was born, and suddenly I can't keep this life-saving feast, you know. It scared me,
because
but
because of money, right? Essentially because of money.
yeah, it's so trivial. Like, I missed one, but turns out I didn't even miss it. He miscounted, and he just gave me this big scare, and I was like, "This is weird," you know. General Assembly, led by God, they miscounted and told their child, you're gonna die." You know, like, that's how I took it, and I was like, "This is BS," you know. This isn't God. This is a numbers game, you know. And that's when I knew. I was like, "Oh, we're just pawns, you know. They don't care about us."
Yeah. The
Yeah,
whole, I love you so much. My only concern is for you, but you missed 1 month. Sorry, dude. You're not keeping Passover. You're dying.
yeah,
Because essentially, to those who don't know, not keeping the Passover or not being able to keep the Passover, you might as well die, right? Like, there's
yeah,
like, if you're forbidden from taking Passover, that's it. In the church, right? If your head is in the church, that is what is going through your mind. And was this during COVID?
yeah. I think it was shortly after the lockdown when I started to add things up. Um,
Because I remember that. I remember because I was a unit leader, and I remember specifically in the unit leader meeting, I was told by my overseer that if they've not tithed, they were not allowed to keep the Passover. And they were saying this is the prophecy of the narrow gate getting narrower, right? The gates are closing, right? I also remember General Pastor said that COVID was like the last plague, right? Like it was the the plague, right? Like this is it, like the hour of trial. But then they started removing those videos and basically said that never happened. So we'll just move on. Um, but yeah, I remember there was a lot of backlash with that because I know a few members that actually left because their family members who were in the church didn't tithe, and so they were told not to keep the Passover. And then the exception was if that person, let's say if the son, right, and the mom, right, didn't keep the tithe that month. So then the mom couldn't keep Passover. So they
mhm.
said, well, she can keep second Passover, or what you could do is you as the son could tithe on behalf of her, right? So he could tithe on behalf of her. That would consider her tithe, and then she'd be able to keep the Passover, right? So, and it's just like how. So it is just about money.
Yeah,
It is just about money. Like you're paying your way for heaven. That's essentially what it is. But they talk about the Roman Catholic Church and indulgences and stuff, and they're like, oh, how sinful and wicked and stuff. But it's like, what's more sinful than saying, oh, because you didn't tithe, you're dead?
yeah.
Like I don't get
Well,
it.
I think they really set a lot of conditions for members, especially people that are joining for the first time, right? What is the first condition, right? You got to get baptized, right?
Yep.
You go to other churches, you don't get baptized. Like, you get baptized maybe when you're an adult, you know, right?
Right.
But what they do is they really want to reel you in. They say, if you want to believe this truth, you want to come here and be saved from disasters, right? They really scare you, all that fear mongering. Then you have to be baptized. Yeah.
It's only fair because what's the main one that they use, right? World War III.
What, Daniel's prophecy?
World War III, right? The seal of God. They say,
Oh, still
in
got
Revelation 7, how the four winds are being held back, and you better get on this train now because they're about to be released.
yeah.
And so it scares people, and they're like, "Yeah, I'll do whatever you say," because like, who wants to be a sitting duck in World War III?
Yeah.
You know. Actually, I remember when Russia invaded Ukraine. I remember that whole year was all about Russia and Ukraine, how this is the end, how this is World War III, how this is what was prophesied, and how, um, like Father's footsteps are coming, right? 2022 was the end, right? It's fulfillment of prophecy, etc. And I, it was just constant, right? Constant. And the fear mongering doesn't stop when you get baptized. It just gets worse over time,
Yeah.
right? Because when you get baptized, it's like, oh, you got baptized. That's cool. You kept Passover, the temporary Passover. That's cool. Well, now we have Saturday, right? Then you go and keep one service on Saturday. And then one service turns into, oh, we actually have 3 services. So you need to stay for all 3.
Yeah.
Then now you stayed for all 3. Now there's a third day, actually. So you got to keep that. And then, oh, the other feasts are coming up. So you have to keep those feasts too. And those feasts have offering as well as the Sabbath tithe and Sabbath offering, right?
Right.
Now you kept the feast, and now it's like, oh, well, there's actually 29, 5 a.m. and 8 p.m. or, well, I guess depending on the time change. They have 29 early morning and evening worship services that you must attend now too. And then on top of all that, now you did all that. That's great. Now you're on the cooking team, right? You have to feed the members with your own money. Now there's food supply donation that you have to give every month. Now there's special offering, right, for construction, or there's mother special offering because people are going to Korea and you're going to give mothers some money. And then on top of that, now you got to go preaching and you go on short term. But who pays for the short term? You. You buy the ticket, you share the hotel, you leave money for food, right? And so it's like, and then there's the weekly worship, or not the weekly worship, there's the, Ascension and birthday of On Time Home and the birthday of New Jerusalem. You got to keep those now, right? And you got to cook and you got to do all that. And then there's preaching 2 to 3 times a week, and there's Bible study. And so it's not oh, by the way, here, let me preach to you. By the way, you're going to have to do this whole laundry list of things, right? It's not like that. It's like, hey, World War III is coming. Keep the Passover, get baptized, and you'll be saved.
Yeah, like it's not like any other mainstream church or even some cults. You like before you know it, you're changing your priorities, you're changing your work schedule, you're changing, how often you see a family, your spouse, that's not in it. Like, yeah, it takes a lot of commitment for me, I I would say I led a double life sometimes. I would come when I had to come, but when I didn't, I would leave my cult personality at the door. But yeah, it's crazy how much they want you to change. You lose your individuality, right? You start following the flock, and then you find yourself in this social environment that's full of peer pressure, guilt, shame, right? You didn't come for that preaching night or that service, and then when you're gone, the leaders start talking about you. They say, "Oh, that brother, he has some struggles with his faith. You know, we need to study with him more. We need to indoctrinate him." And that is something that I've seen all the time when I was there, right? We would keep tabs, such close tabs on each member, where we were just micromanaging every part of their life, right? Oh, he has a wife or a husband that's not in the cult. We got to watch out for that. We got to preach to them so that they could come, so that their faith will rise, right? Like, it's so intricate how they go about changing someone's life so that they could commit every part of their life to the cult.
Oh yeah, it's not. They're not slouches. They're not slouches. And to be fair, right? Like, I don't think majority of members, I'll even say majority of leaders, I don't think that they really know what they're doing, right? So I'll just kind of say that just outright, because I used to do that, right? I went to the unit leader meetings, and basically what it was is, hey, you have a list of members that need to have their attendance up, right? You have a list of members who's tithing, who's not. Like, you're monitoring everything they do, where they live, like, what is their job? Are they married or not married? Like what you said. And literally everything about their life gets reported. Everything in that church gets reported, right? Because you have basically a pecking order. You have a unit leader over 5 or 6 members, then you have a group leader over 5 or 6 unit leaders, and then usually the overseers over the group leaders, etc. Right? And it just keeps going up and up and up and up and up. And
Right.
everyone essentially is eyes on the ground, right? Because everyone reports on everyone, and it all goes all to the top, right? So everything is it's basically like a big telephone game, right? Like everyone is reporting on everybody. And to your point, right? Like if they did get married or had a girlfriend or a family member or parents that were not in the church and didn't buy the doctrine, that was extremely difficult because, again, when you get baptized, they tell you, like, when you go home, because you're like, oh, I need to tell everybody, right? This is an amazing truth. I feel so blessed. I feel amazing. I feel like God has blessed me, and I really know who God is. You get excited, right? Because you think you did a really good thing. You
Mm-hmm.
think you're in the truth and that everyone should know this amazing truth, right? But what do? They say, yeah, I know you want to tell everybody, but what's going to happen when you start telling people things like this, like mother is in Korea, or An Sang-hong is a Korean man who died, but his second coming Christ, but he died, and all these different things. I have to keep all day Saturday, or all these things, but they kind of stop you. You're like, whoa, whoa, whoa! If you tell people that this is what's going to happen, they're gonna try and stop you from going, right? They're gonna persecute you and say, An Sang-hong's not God, mother's not God, this is a cult, this is a high control group. So they already prep the members from their baptism to know exactly what is going to happen if they start preaching to their family members. And
Mm-hmm.
sure enough, they go home, and what do? Start telling everybody exactly what they believe, and what happens? Their prophecy literally fulfills itself, because what do the parents say? Oh, you're in a cult. This is wrong. This is a high control group. Look at all these false prophecies. Look at this. Look at that. And then they're like, oh, they told me this would happen. This is definitely the true church, because they told me this was going to happen, and it did.
Yeah, they really like to get ahead of all the slander, right? Because they know that what they're teaching is very hard to believe, for the average person. So yeah, the way they really know psychology, like they know that this persecution complex would help keep people in, when someone as close as your family or your spouse, they tell you like, come on now, like this is crazy, but then you spend so much time with them, they indoctrinate you so much that you're trapped in their way of thinking. You think like it's so hard to believe, like, oh, this Korean woman is our god. Like I was
Yeah.
always so embarrassed to bring it up, even to my friends. I just said, come for the movie night. I wouldn't say anything else.
I'll let somebody else break it to you, but let's just go to the movies.
Yeah.
I remember kind of on that point when we were doing those kind of group get-togethers with, like, non-believers and stuff. I remember doing some seminars on the community college campuses where, we did seminars on basically any college campus that we could. And I remember that there was a few members that were designated, usually unit leaders or above, typically not normal members, but they could be if they were very active. But I remember that they would dress up like college students, right? Even though they didn't go there, they'd have jeans and a backpack and a polo or whatever. And they would go in there and sit down and basically pretend like they're, taking notes or something, or that they're, you know, uh, basically they're pretending to be college students when they're really not. And so what you have a couple of people who go out and get, college kids who are maybe in between classes or the classes are over and say, hey, come get some pizza and some soda. And we're going to do a Bible study. It's going to be like 15, 20 minutes. And, that's basically it.
Yeah.
And so these students walk in, they're like, oh, there's like 30 people here. Whoa, but realistically, 90% of those people are actually members in disguise, essentially. Did you ever have anything like that happen?
Yeah, I mean, even preaching door to door, sometimes we would always say like, oh, today while we're preaching, it's going to be preaching casual, we're going to wear like a button up and that's it. Don't wear your tie, right? Take off your tie, we don't want to look Mormon or, like anything else. So yeah, we were very wary of those kind of things. And also when we're on campus, we would try not to use our Bibles because that would just scare people away. You're holding a Bible. Like some people, they don't want to hear that. They don't want to spend time going through a whole book after a class. So we come up with the iPad, very innocent, or like a little simplified preaching book, right?
Yeah.
Not Feed My Sheep. Do you know what it's called?
Is it the plastic one that had like slides or something?
It was just like little cartoons with animals and how there's a male and female animal, so there must be a male and female God.
I don't think I ever got that one. I remember the plastic preaching binder that had like the almost like PowerPoint slides in them. I remember the black preaching binder. I remember the Feed My Sheep, but I don't remember anything else. I remember the happy postcards that we'd hand out to everybody.
Right. Anyways, we would use those kind of preaching tools so that we could, seem more approachable to college students or even door to door, because it's so intimidating to just like, look at this, look at that, just start verse hopping. So that's another way that we would reel people in slowly.
Because I think people have to understand that if you go to a Bible study with the WMSCOG or somebody who's a part of it, essentially what it is you don't have a say, or you don't have an opinion there. You don't have any knowledge there. You're there because you have a spiritual cancer that only the WMSCOG can cure, right? Mm-hmm. They don't have to hear anything about you. They don't care what anything you say. They don't care about anything that you have to offer. You're there to listen. That is it. And as soon as they know that you know something, or that you're well-versed maybe, or even you read Greek and Hebrew, or you're a theologian, or you have seminary training or something, as soon as they start suspecting, they cut it and they're like, oh, yeah, this was great. Maybe next time. And then they just blow you off and they never talk to you again. Right. Did you experience stuff like that? If there's someone that maybe just wasn't buying it, or maybe knew too much about the Bible?
Yeah. When we're preaching, we're short on time, we just got to get the people that are willing to read every verse, and like, we know, like, oh, they believe this part, then we could definitely go to the next part. And like, we know when they're, falling for what we're preaching. But the moment they say they're Catholic, or they say like, oh, the way you're explaining that verse is out of context, right? We just say, oh, okay, thank you, we have to go, right? And we'd be very passive about that, But
yeah, I remember faking a phone call and being like, oh, I got a call from our driver, we gotta leave because our time's up or something. Yeah. But realistically, we're just like, oh, this person has too much yeast, or they're a time-wasting demon or something. That's what they call people who have maybe biblical knowledge, or they can't be taken advantage of because they're well-versed or something like that. They understand the context. We call them, they have too much yeast, right? Too much understanding, or they'll call it false understanding or fake understanding, or a time-wasting demon, which we used to call the LDS time-wasting demons, because they would just listen to us for an hour and agree and everything. We'll be like, oh, so you want to come, get baptized or come keep the Sabbath? Oh, no, but thanks for your message, right? And that was just like, oh, are you kidding me? I've been here for an hour.
Yeah.
So for those of you that don't know, that's what that is. But
I think I want to touch up on that. When we're preaching, I felt a little deceptive too, because we were looking for vulnerable people. We're looking for people that weren't well versed or that, just bought into everything we were saying. Like, we wanted you to eat it up for us to keep continuing, because
Right.
what we're teaching it's unbelievable, Yeah.
Yeah. And if there's any resistance, right, we either try to, at first, I feel like we try to, get around it, or we try to squash it with analogies, or maybe just, what I used to do, and what a lot of people do, is we get stuck in one subject, and it's like, well, what about the Passover, right? Let's go over here where I know I'm safe, right? Or
Right.
what about the Sabbath day where I know I'm safe? I might have gotten stuck here on this one, but Sabbath, Passover, it's always safe, right? Because you can be like, well, even though maybe this is, we can debate this, but what about Sabbath? Well, look over here, right? Look over here, Sabbath, Passover.
I know this is sketchy, but let me give you something more digestible. What do they say? You got to give them baby food, right? Baby formula, right?
Yeah.
I thought that was very interesting. That means like, oh, we don't want to give them the full truth. We want to give them a little bit, because we don't want to scare them away. Yeah, it's white
Yeah,
lies. Yeah.
exactly. Or it's lying by omission.
Mm-hmm.
Are you familiar with the good lie that they used to? Have you
Mm-hmm.
heard of that?
Yeah.
Basically, the church essentially encourages. I won't say teach, because I'll just say encourage. They encourage, like, basically lying by omission, right? Like, if your family asks you, like, oh, how are you doing in the church? Like, are you okay? Like, you're never gonna tell them if you're not okay, right? You're never gonna tell them what's really going on. Like, I just got done with 17 early morning and evening worship services and preaching, and I'm like, I'm done. I'm just I'm done, right? I'm
Mm-hmm.
tired. But you'll never say that to them, right? Even though it's true, right? Or, for instance, I had the house church in my house for like 2 or 3 years. My family had no idea. They would just come and visit me, and they're like, "Why don't you have any furniture?" I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh, I haven't gotten around to it yet." But 3 years,
Yeah.
like, 'cause my living room's empty, because obviously, like, I need room for the chairs, I need room for the tables, I need room for the pulpit, I need room for all these things, right? The tithing stuff, all that stuff. And but I could never tell them, like, oh yeah, I have the church in my house. Like, they wouldn't be able to understand what I'm doing, right? Because they'd be like, well, is the church helping you with that? Are they helping you pay the mortgage? Are they helping you pay this? Well, no, because I knew it was just going to open up, you know, it was going to open up a can of worms that really wouldn't end well for the church or me or the image of the church. So, that's just one example, right? Like, your family member is not discreet because they're just trying not, they're not wanting to tell you, really. They just don't want to hurt the image of the church, because they're scared if they hurt the image of the church, they basically are dishonoring God. And if they hurt the image of the church and dishonor God, they fear that you might not be saved, or you'll think the church is weird, or you'll you'll not want to be a part of it, and then that would just be devastating to them.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
So for family members who have, their siblings or their parents or whoever they might hold dear, or spouses even in some cases, if they're still in the church, what would you recommend as far as maybe trying to plant seeds, or at least try to get them out in some sort of way? Has anything worked for you? What have you tried as far as maybe trying to reason with your dad, or what did you do to maybe get your mom out? Because your mom's out, right?
Yeah.
So maybe walk us through who or how you were able to get your mom out a little bit.
So that was tough. Getting my mom out was very hard. Obviously, I leveraged the fact that she knew that there was problems in the church. She's always hated the gossip. She's always hated how robotic we were. How we just obeyed everything. We didn't have any personal preferences, stuff like that. but she always believed the doctrine. So that was something that I really had to break down for her. But it's very tedious. I've made a lot of mistakes. We've, butted heads quite a bit in the beginning until after a certain point, we're just like, let's not talk about this, or when we do, let's really listen to each other. And I think it's very hard to really get into it. But the way I got her out was ultimately respect. You have to respect their pacing and how they come out. You really have to be wary of not feeding into their persecution complex, which is very hard to do when you're an outsider, right? You think, oh man, like, why is my son or my wife or, whoever, why are they in
Yeah.
this place that is teaching something so insane? Like, it doesn't make sense, And what do? You say, like, are you crazy? Like, how can you believe this stuff? Like, you start attacking the person and their intellect, right? That never works. I found out that just makes them want to go more, because what do? They get ahead of it. They say, if anyone, even your family, right, the people that love you most are going against your beliefs, that is God prophesying that will happen, right? And that just makes them want to go deeper and deeper into it. So my advice would be, try not to talk about it too much in the beginning. Really try to get close with them in other ways, right? Dinners, reunions, whatever. Give them gifts, anything that would make you guys feel a little closer. That is super important. Don't even bring the church up, because that'll put up a wall, you know. But then slowly, I think the best way to do it, a Korean pastor that studies Korean cults actually told me this, and it really helped me try to get my mom out, was ask questions as if you're genuinely curious about their teachings, right? Don't confront them. Like, just ask, like, oh, that's interesting, but what about this? How does this add up? Where's his where's his baptism date? Is there a record of that I could see? Right? Those are important questions. Or how many times have they prophesied about the world ending? Like, they prophesied 4 times. So when you ask a member that question, right, one of their cop outs is, oh, Jonah's prophecy. It was prophesied to not happen. So, right, that's why God prophesied and nothing happened, right? But you can't use
Yeah.
that same prophecy 4 times. You can't recycle it.
But they do say, right? They say something can be fulfilled once, twice, even 3 times.
Yeah, no. If you actually have common
Right.
sense, you can see through that. They're like, oh, it's a recruitment tactic to get people scared and riled up.
What kills me is they say, oh, those who focus on the day or the hour, they perish, right? They're judged by God. But it's like the only reason I know the day or the hour is because you guys keep putting the day and the hour in my head, right? Like,
Yeah,
you keep saying 1988, and I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, or 1999, okay, 2012, okay. Like, who's the one in this context? Who's the one focusing on the date?
yeah.
I'm not the one. Like, did you come up with 2012? I
No,
didn't come up with 2012,
I mean, it's
right?
God's word, so they're like, oh, none of that matters if God is saying it, right?
Apparently, God lies, right?
Yeah, all the time.
So, if I could give an example where you're saying, so that's actually how I got out too, is what that pastor was saying. I actually did. I mean, I didn't know who the pastor was, but I actually did that with my overseer. I found a bunch of stuff. I'm not going to go into my story, but basically what I did is I found a bunch of stuff online and kind of was like, okay, this is pretty weird. But at the same time, right, at the end of the day, what do they always resort back to? Well, the Bible, right? Even though, yeah, these things are shady, these things are weird, and I definitely want explanations, but what does the Bible teach? What does the Bible say? And they always resort back to that, and they're trained to resort back to that. If they see something hesitant, right, they're like, they're taught, oh, if you see something that makes you doubt, just remember Passover. right? Or Sabbath day or something like that. And so I remember meeting with my missionary overseer in Utah, Zion, and basically asked him 3 questions. The first, I mean, this is over 2 or 3 meetings, but I'm not gonna get too specific. But the first question I asked was about the weeds and wheat. So for those who don't know, basically the concept is Jesus came, planted the wheat, and then after he died and the apostles died, the devil came and sowed weeds among the wheat. And the WMSCOG teaches that the wheat that was sown, excuse me, the wheat that was sown is the Passover, the Sabbath, the feast, and these kind of ordinances, right? And they say, see, so the false churches are going to keep the weeds, which is Sunday, Christmas, all these things that come after the death of Jesus, essentially. But in that parable, the wheat is never uprooted or destroyed, and there's never a second planting. There's one planting, and the wheat remains the entire time until the end of the age, where the wheat is gathered in bundles, taken to the barn, and the weeds are gathered and burned, right? But the WMSCOG teach also that the Passover, which is a wheat, Sabbath, which is a wheat, the feast, all these other teachings that they consider wheat, were destroyed, and that Ansang Hong comes and brings them back again, which does not match the prophecy that they themselves teach and claim as their own prophecy. So I asked my missionary overseer, I was like, okay, so if the Passover and the Sabbath and these things are the wheat, where in the prophecy does it say that the wheat is removed or the wheat is destroyed or that there's a second planting of the wheat? It doesn't say that anywhere. So explain to me how this all makes sense. But of course, you have to ask it like you're genuinely like, I want to believe it, right? I want to believe, I want to follow you, I want to be on the same page as you. But I just feel like there's some details that we need to iron out here before I can, because you have, like what the pastor was saying, you have to be on that page. Because if I just approached it like, you're lying to me, right? You said this, but look at what it says here. Conversation would be over immediately and no one would benefit from it. You can't get your point across. But if you kind of, gaslight yourself and you're just like, oh, maybe I just didn't read it, or maybe I'm just not understanding. I mean, I'm not the smartest. Maybe I read it wrong, but I just don't see where the wheat is destroyed or uprooted, or there's a second planting. Can you please show me that in scripture so I can believe?
Well,
But it doesn't exist.
those kind of questions aren't encouraged during studies,
They
like
are.
you think they're encouraged? Like, I think what they really want from members is for you to just say, just yes men, like, okay, what's next? I believe that. I believe this. Like, it's very rare to find a member that's questioning those kind of things because we're all too scared to,
Right.
Yeah.
And I was mostly coming at it from like, if I'm like an unbelieving family member too, like they can apply that to themselves, because what I would recommend is asking those kind of questions where there's little holes that you can clearly see, which the information itself is great, but the way you present the information is the most important part, because if you can't get your point across, you might as well not even have the information. So when I was talking to my missionary overseer, I had to gaslight myself like I'm an idiot, but I know the prophecy. I taught it for 10 years, right? I know very well what it says, right? And I know that they were lying. But I came across like I was trying to get my faith back. I was trying to believe again. I just need to have these questions that I need to bridge this gap, right, before I can get to that point. And that's how I had to say it every time. And the conversation lasted. And I was able to get my point across. And I was able to even maybe poke and prod a little bit. And so I think something like that would be great for maybe a non-believing family member to do also, because I would recommend you need to learn what they teach, but you also need to learn why it's flawed. And you need to learn how to present those kind of arguments in a manner to where it can come across. And how I would recommend doing that, and maybe you can chime in a little bit too, is if a family member came, right? I would highly recommend not studying with your family member. Have your family member present, but I wouldn't study with your family member directly, because you don't want that, one-on-one, because you don't want them to feel like uncomfortable or foolish or something like that. I would recommend get someone who's like a deacon or a missionary or the overseer themselves. Sit across from them and ask them the questions, because they will listen to that missionary. That missionary is basically father and mother to them, right? They're the representative put in place by God to lead that organization in that local branch or whatever. So I'd recommend really knowing the doctrine, knowing the holes, and knowing how to present it in a gentle, like, I want to be on your side. I just can't get over this. But if I can get over this, I'll be on your side, right? You're kind of giving them that, like, okay, we just got to get through this and figure this out, because you're planting seed in their brain of, whoa, wait, that, yeah, where is it in the prophecy? But if you just say, hey, you're lying to me, you're stupid, or you're in a cult, this is what it actually means, automatically that, that defense kicks in, right? And so you have couple things going on. You're talking to the overseer. So the overseer, you're seeing him stumble and trip and all this stuff, and they're looking at the overseer. So it's not on them, but they're noticing, like, oh, why is he stumbling? Oh, why is he dancing around this? Like, we're the truth, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. What would you recommend? Would that be something that might work?
So personally, if I was getting a family member out, I mean, obviously my situation is very different. I've never been in that spot, so I can't really say too much on it. But for someone else, what I would advise on is honestly, I personally wouldn't even go into the church, just because I'm scared I might get indoctrinated and brainwashed. It's a very slippery slope,
Right.
So for me, I mean, if you get to that point, you definitely have to know all these questions to ask, and you really have to walk a tightrope.
You have to do your homework.
Yeah, you got to do your homework, which is really hard to do because there's not much information other than the examining site and maybe whatever you put out. But I think the safest way is to have these conversations with them one-on-one. But if you do get to the church, yeah, really, really do your homework. But always keep your guard up. You don't want to start looking at the verse and you're like, oh, I think I believe this. Like, that's very dangerous.
Yeah, I definitely, if you are going to go into the church and you're going to take my approach of how I described it, you definitely need to do your homework. One thing I would recommend too is, if you are going to do a one-on-one or something, or with the overseer, make them stay in the passage. Because too many times, right, if you're going to ask questions, they'll be like, okay, well, I'll get back to that, but let's go over here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or let's look at the Passover. Let's look at these other easier subjects, right, where I won't get really too much pushback. You have to keep them in the same passage at all costs. So that's another thing I forgot to mention. You have to keep them at the passage at all costs, because they will just bounce around for hours. But if you keep them on the passage, for instance, in this Matthew chapter 13, the parable of the weeds and wheat, if they're like, oh, well, I don't know, I can get an answer, end it. Be like, okay, when you get an answer, I will come back. But I would need to know that first before we continue into all these other things, because this is a very important part, right? So that would be my recommendation. But again, like, it's not a one size fits all, right?
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest things too that maybe we could talk a little bit about, I think you may have brought it up a little bit, but giving in to those stereotypes that they've already instilled in the member about the family, right? Because they use the verse like, Jesus says, I have come to bring a sword, right? A father will turn against son, and daughter against their mother, etc. Right? The enemies of a man will be in his own household. And so they use that against you as an unbelieving family member, right? This is what they're taught. So essentially, whatever the church is saying you're going to do the opposite, right? If the church says you're going to persecute, encourage, right? Like, for instance, if you see your sibling or your spouse or whatever doing preaching practice, right? Be like, oh, like, can you tell me about it? Or let's say they're being lazy with it and they're not wanting to do it, and you're like, hey, you need to do that. Isn't there in church say you need to do that? go, you need to do that now. Here, I'll watch the kids. Go 10, 15 minutes. Do that right now. Because that breaks everything that WMSCOG says your family will do.
Yeah.
Right? They'll say your family will stop you from studying. They'll stop you from preaching. But if you know that your sibling or your significant other, whoever in the church is going preaching at this time, offer to drive them to the church, or offer to go with them, or offer to or remind them, because that does not happen.
Yeah.
Right? It's completely breaking the mold of what they say that the family's going to do.
That's a really important point, because cults are very intricate with the complexes they give people. So when you're trying to get someone out, you really have to play their game. Like you said, you have to, help them with what they're doing. Even though it might seem counterintuitive, you might think, why am I helping them go to the cult? It doesn't make sense. But if you go against it, they'll come against you even harder because of their complex. So it's really important that you learn to play their game. You're very gentle, understanding of their pacing, and eventually they'll realize, oh, you're not an enemy, like the Bible says, like you're gonna make me fall away, right? No, instead you're this person that really understands their journey, and eventually whatever breaks them or makes them question this truth, that's when they'll feel close enough to you to ask for guidance. And I think that is so important if you're trying to get someone out.
Or they'll open up to you about their struggles, right? Maybe they're struggling with the doctrine. Maybe they're struggling with, because you have to remember too, even in the cult as members, you're not allowed to show your problems. Even as members, you're not allowed to show your emotions. You're not allowed to show anything that might reflect the church bad. You're not allowed to show, right? Always smile, always God bless you. Oh, always do the same mannerisms, the same everything every time, right? No deviation whatsoever. But essentially, that will get old. It does, right? Everyone gets tired of it, right?
Mhm.
Deep down in everyone's soul, it's just they know, right? But they can't tell you or talk to you about how it feels, because they don't want to reflect the church back. And so, from baptism, if you're, as an unbelieving family member, if you're persecuting them and you're stopping them and doing all these, things that the cult is telling them that is going to happen if they want to choose the truth, or they want to follow God and they want salvation, that's going to just create a chasm of separation. But if you, like what you were saying, if you go against that and you say, oh yeah, like go on the Sabbath, you want to go all day on the Sabbath? Sure, I'll drive you. You know what? I'll wake you up, right? I'll wake you up. I'll help you get your things together. I'll get your Bible bag together, and I'll help you. Or, oh, you need money for cooking? Oh, for the food? Oh yeah, here's some money. Or, because there's been so many times where members get more indoctrinated the more their family does not help them essentially do the cult stuff.
Mhm.
But it seems counterintuitive, but what will really happen is they will come to trust you and realize that, oh, this person is actually not like what you're saying, not how the Bible describes or the church is saying. And so eventually, the church will run them into the ground. But if there's already that chasm between you because there's persecution or something, they're not going to tell you, they're not going to talk to you about it when they're in a low place, in their low faith. They're never going to talk to you about it because, again, they don't trust you. They trust the church more than you at this point.
They feel ashamed to even admit that they're having doubts, because right, the whole time they feel like they're so firm about it. They've been telling you, like, I believe this 100%. So
Yeah.
yeah.
But let's say you're helping them, right? You're helping them go to the Sabbath. You're encouraging them to study. I mean, it seems wrong, but just hear me out. You're encouraging them to study. You're reminding them of preaching, or when they bear fruit, you're happy for them or something, even though it's terrible. But that gets rid of any chasm that might have been in place. That creates that closeness to where they will eventually open up to you. They will eventually say things to you. Eventually that door will be open. But, it's kind of like, I'm going to use a cult reference that I learned. I don't know if you remember this, but there's a guy that's walking that has a jacket.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a bet between the sun and like a cloud. Basically, the bet is, whoever can get the man to take his coat off is the winner, right? So the cloud goes first. The cloud comes and is like blowing on the person, rain, snow, sleet, everything. He just keeps getting it tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then he's like, dang, I couldn't get the coat off. But then the sun comes out and is like, okay, my turn. And then makes it nice and warm, and the flowers grow, and there's shade, and it's nice and it's breezy. So he takes his jacket off immediately because, essentially that's what you're trying to do. The cult says you're going to be like the cloud, but you need to be like the sun. I know it doesn't make any sense, but I guarantee you eventually that door will be open and they will open up to you. They will, because in their mind, you'll be a part of it, right? You'll be helping them. You won't be a persecutor. You won't be a hater. You won't be a devil or something or a demon or anything like that. So I think that is definitely probably, and that's something everyone can do, right? Maybe, what I was suggesting is a little bit more advanced and will take more time and diligence and stuff. But I think that's something that everybody can do is just not persecute, not stop them. If anything, encourage them, help them, because it will do the opposite of what you think it is going to do.
Yeah, it's a really big waiting game. That's all you can do when someone's in it. You can't pressure them. You really want to be wary of how often you bring it up too. Even with my mom, I was very careful after we butted heads. I would only bring it up when she was having a good day.
Yeah.
And I would ask her like, "Mom, would you want to talk about this a little today?" And she'll be like, "Oh, I'm too tired for that." And I'll be like, "Okay, we can talk about it another time." Like,
yeah,
you can't just be in your own head and say like, "Oh, I want to get them out today." Like, that's not how it works.
And it will do the opposite, 100%.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, knowing where your family's at too, like knowing the stress, excuse me, knowing what they're going through, the stress that they're going through, because just know that they are doing so much to where they're exhausted, right? And so for you to persecute them and be like the cloud essentially, it's just going to make it worse too, for their
Yeah.
mental health, their physical health, everything. So the best thing to do is, even if you're going to bring up the church, bring it up in a good light too. I know it sounds counterintuitive. I know it does. But if you bring it up in a good light and you don't use the word cult, you don't use the word high control group, you don't use any trigger words that the cult has already put into effect, that as soon as you say these words, are like, hey, can I talk to you about something I saw online, right? All these different trigger words are like, automatically the gates go up, the drawbridge comes up. But if you're like, oh, I heard you guys got this award. Oh, that's pretty cool. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Or, knowing that the members themselves are victims and are not enemies too, right? The members themselves, I mean, there's a few at the top who know what's going on, right? But 90% of the people, even the overseers or the leaders that you probably think are demons and are just terrible people, they're actually really good people. They really are.
Mm-hmm.
It's just unfortunate that they too are victims of it. And they're even, I would say, even more so victims because, like what you were saying, Han, a lot of these people, they live off the church. If they leave, they have 20 years of basically no work history, nothing. Everything is paid for by the church. Their life is the church. They live in the church. Any money they get is from the church, right? They have everything. They have nothing to fall back on at all. They have no bridges. They have nothing. Right?
I like how you brought that up. I've talked to a lot of ex-members too, and the first thing we do when we leave is we get very bitter. We're like, oh, screw those guys. They call me a demon and Satan. They call me Judas Iscariot. Like, those people suck, right? They're the real demons. But over time, I started realizing like they're all victims, right? I was a victim. They're victims. So obviously it's super hard to hold back that kind of hate, right? That hatred, because we don't understand, like, this thing is so complex. There's so many moving parts, but we have to learn to humanize them. We have to learn to overlook their, their ignorance or whatever, because hell, I was one of those people that my friends would say like, bro, I think you're in a cult. And I'm like, you don't know what you're talking about.
Right.
You know? Like if you knew like what I studied and stuff like that, this is how I would think. I would say, man, like you don't know what you're talking about. But hell, I would even pray sometimes. I would say, Father, Mother, like I have doubts lately. Please erase these doubts from my mind. Please let me never leave this church. I will die with this church. I would think like this. Obviously that didn't happen. I'm out. But
Thank God.
stuff like that, right? I realized like, oh crap, I'm brainwashed. Like, why am I praying like this? Like, why am I not trusting my intuition? What's telling me that there's a lot off about this church, right? And that's what a lot of these members are going through in their heads. They're all going through the same things at different times, but I think it's really good for family members or anyone that has someone in it to know like that's what's going on in their heads. And it really is a process. You really have to be gentle about it. Yeah.
Yeah. And two, I think for the family who has family in the cult, just know that even though they seem like they're going preaching all the time, they're keeping all their fees, giving all their money, all their time to the church, that's every one of these ex-members. That was their life for, in my case, almost 10 years. My wife, 10 and a half years. In other people's cases, 15 years, 20 years, right? Like in positions, deacons, missionaries, overseers, unit leaders, group leaders. Like we all were like that at one point, right? We were sent, we experienced the persecution, we experienced all these things, short terms, all these feasts, all this tithing, bearing fruit, constant rejection, um, and we were all in that for years, right? We would receive online slander, and I would be sent articles by my mom. I'd be sent pictures. I'd be sent books. I'd be sent videos. I'd be sent all these kind of things, and it didn't work. But eventually it does work, right? And it's just a matter of time. It's a matter of, I feel like if my family would have been a little more like loving and supportive, I would have come out a lot sooner, because again, the cult puts that chasm between you and your family from the very beginning, because they, their state of mind, especially because when more people are baptized in this church, I was 19. I had no idea about anything. My wife was 18. She had no idea about anything, right? And so when you're like amazed at these prophecies that they tell you, and then they're like, okay, well, here's another thing. Of course they're going to believe it, right? And so, because they just got baptized, why would they not? Why would they not believe it? It's prime time for them to instill that in your brain.
Mm-hmm.
And so, just know that there is hope. I never would have dreamed that I would be outside of the WMSCOG, and that goes for I'll say almost every one of the ex-members.
Me too. Yeah.
So, for the family members who may think they're hopeless, or they're running out, or they are just done and they just can't take it anymore, just know that as soon as you give up hope, the church wins. Because that's one thing they actually cannot take from you, but they want to. So if you give up hope, they will win, because eventually there will be a time where they'll come out. And when they come out, this is another important part too, kind of talking about what we were talking about before. When they come out, it's important for the family to be ready. Because, for instance, Han, if I was to ask you, if your dad came out and was like, hey, like, I don't know why these things happened, just for the fact that he's out and would you accept him into your life and maybe make, kind of bridge that gap and maybe make amends?
Yeah, that's all I ever want. Obviously, we're gonna have to have some tough conversations, and I'd have to guide him through even my journey of leaving. And obviously, he knows much more about the doctrine than I ever have, so he's gonna have to figure some stuff out too. But I've talked to his side of the family that I was estranged from for a while too. But recently, I started reconnecting with them, and we talk about like, hey, like if he does come out, what would we do? And my uncles would say like, he would just come to my house, give him a bed, and we would start this new new chapter, and I would be there too to help him the best I could. As long as he admits that it's a cult, that's where we can actually have a new beginning. And I think I would be very hopeful if that happened.
And that kind of ties it all together too, because if you're helpful from the beginning and you're not a persecutor, you're not a slanderer as they call you, or demon possessed as the church paints you, but you're helpful, you're there for them, that will be the coming out process will be so much easier, faster, and maybe even sooner if they know that if they leave, right, they don't have to face shame and ridicule and you know because essentially, like, it's embarrassing. It's really embarrassing because I mean, I apologized to my family because I'm like, look, this is what I believed in. This is what happened to me. I told them everything, and they're like, I had no idea. Like, yeah, because I was too scared to tell you. Because if I told you, right, I didn't think you'd be saved, or I wouldn't be saved, or they have this whole complex of, it's just you don't talk about it. And so if you as an unbelieving family member are open, right, and the people in know that you were open and that you don't hold anything against them, there is no friction. If there is friction, try and get rid of it. If there is, if you are persecuting them or something, stop. It's not going to do anything. But if you can bridge that gap, be loving, be helpful, be there for them, because eventually this church will spit them out. It's just a matter of time, right? This church, yeah, they're good at manipulating, they're good at psychology, they're good at all these things, but what they're also really good at is grinding people down and spitting them out, right? It's just a matter of time. It really is. And so, what happens too is a lot of these people, they don't want to face their family. And so what do? They're more comfortable being in there, even though they know it's wrong. And that is some cases too. I've heard of that. They're in there, they know it's wrong, but they don't know what else there is. And they're too ashamed to ask their family for help. They're too ashamed to ask for forgiveness from their family or something, or maybe they burn bridges or something. That is just another way for them to stay in the cult more than they need to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just what I would recommend is really be their safe space, really consider everything they've been going through. Obviously, it's hard to understand every aspect, right? But it's so important to bridge that gap when they do come out. Obviously, there's families that I've heard from where they're like, oh, I don't, like, they've already given up. There's no hope, right? Because they don't know what's going on, right? I totally understand that. But you really don't want to hate their whole character because of this. It's like I said, like, it's a double life. They have a life outside of the cult too. They work, they meet people that aren't in the cult. Like, they have their personality. It's just masked by this thing. And I think it's so important to ignore that side of them when you meet them. Really love them for who they are, right? I know a lot of family members, even my dad's side, they're just like, I don't know, man. I haven't seen the guy in like 10 years. And they're just like, yeah, we don't know about him, and I think that doesn't help bridge the gap at all. I think it makes it worse. So really try to just see them for who they are, right? Stay close, stay in touch,
And remember that they are victims, right?
Mm-hmm.
They didn't want this. Because, right, the church teaches that you're chosen, right? Like, you're chosen by God. And it gives them, the cult gives them all of their basic needs, right? A sense of community, a sense of purpose, right? That you're chosen by God and your purpose is to preach and to serve the church. And, you have family here, you have everything you need here. They create this utopia, right? Of course, they don't see the underlying what's really going on, but in their mind, there's this utopia that's created. So it kind of triggers all these, basic needs that a human has, right? Community, one goal, one purpose, right? They have family time, they have all these different, they treat each other like family.
Mm-hmm.
So for you to counter that, you have to do it more. right? You have to, you know, you have to do it more, because if you just cut them off or shut them out or something, then they're going to just go to where they know they have family. And in this case, it's the cult. So what I'd recommend doing too, maybe, is taking them on a vacation, getting them out for a minute. But I wouldn't bring up the cult, or like have a, you know, like have a bunch of family and, you know, lock the doors and be like, you're not leaving until you denounce something or something like that. Don't do that. Do not do
Yeah.
that. But what I'm saying is take them on a vacation and just serve them,
Yeah.
right? Serve them, take care of them, do something that they like, make them the best food, like just treat them like they are a rock star for a week. But don't bring up the church, right? Don't say, I wish, you know, like don't do the double-handed thing where it's like, yeah, okay, so now you're gonna leave the church, right? Like, don't do that.
Yeah.
Because if they're separate, like on a vacation, right? Somewhere warm and nice and sunny, and you're just serving them and they're having a good time, the memories of their family will come back. The memories of who they were will come back. And I think they'll have in their brain, they'll be weighing like, who am I now? And what is this feeling that I'm feeling now?
Right.
Because it's a familiar feeling, but I haven't felt it for a long time. So it kind of starts, you know, because because in their mind, they're thinking it's just the cult and there's nothing else. But maybe if you take them on vacation, or you send them like photos of when they were a baby, or when they went here or did this or won a sport or did something, that's going to trigger who they were before, because it's in there. It really is. It's in there, but it's just there's a lot of fluff covering it.
Well,
So
yeah.
if you were able to do something like that, that would be it's very beneficial. But don't backhand it though. Whatever you do, do not backhand.
I'd like to touch on that. Right, they really emphasize, right, spiritual family. Right, we're a spiritual family. This is all you need, because, right, physical passes away, and then what's left? Spirit. So there's a priority, you know. But
Yeah.
the thing about people in this cult is, right, I know this because I was in it too. We're so scared all the time. We're in a constant state of fear. We're scared of the doomsday, and we're constantly watching videos of, you know, us burning, right? And when you have that in your mind at all times, right, it's like a prison sentence. When you're in there, you can't do anything. So really try to approach the situation with gentleness. Don't bring it up too much. Really just try to focus on what you can, you know, breathe. Like, you want to breathe the joy in your relationships and your communication. You don't want to really avoid discord about any of it. That is the best thing you can do as someone that's trying to get someone out.
Yeah. Because they tell the member, oh, the church, Zion, it's heaven on earth. So you as the family have to make a better heaven, because they have to say, like, you have to make it better, right? You have to make heaven wherever you are. So whenever they come to you, they come to your house, they feel better than being at the church, because they get tired. They're scared constantly, right? They constantly think that God is going to kill them all the time, right? Like, it's kind of part of it, right? Like, we sin
Yeah.
against God in heaven, and we're deserving of death and hell and brimstone and fire. And so that's their mindset, is they don't deserve anything. They're a sinner. They're depressed. Like, I was depressed for a long time. I had anxiety for a long time because of that.
Mm-hmm.
But if you make a heaven, or a place where they can just be stress free, they're not judged. They're not, because they are judged in the church all the time, right? They're judged all the time. And so if you create a heaven in your family where they can come, be at peace, feel safe, feel secure, feel welcome, feel wanted,
Yeah.
that's going to essentially a game-changing thing, where if they want to spend more time with you as opposed to being at the church, that's just going to create a lot of questions within themselves. Like, if my family is really what the church says it is, why do I feel better being with my family than being in the church? Because everything in the church it's fake, right? Because as soon as you start doubting, or as soon as you start, I don't want to do this anymore, they cut you off, right? This whole family, we're family forever. It's not true.
Mm-hmm.
So eventually they cut you off, you're shut out, and it's done, right? And, you know, you have to be the heaven, a better heaven than what Zion is, right? So that's essentially all that I can think of at this time, but we'll probably wrap this up here. Is there anything else you might want to say to members who are in, or maybe even family members that have members or members of their household in the church, or really anything that you want to address before we wrap this up?
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know how many members that are in or watching this. It's
You shouldn't be. Just kidding.
yeah.
Because you're watching.
No. We're very nice. No, if you're in it and you somehow found your way to this video or any other Great Light Studio videos or whatever is out there, I know it's scary, right? They tell you you're eating the tree of knowledge of good and evil, right? Your soul's gonna burn up. Trust me, I'm fine. Like, really just test your boundaries, challenge yourself. This is your belief, right? So anything should be able to stand against it if it's 100% true. That was my thought process when I was questioning, like having doubts. I was like, if this is 100% truth, I should be able to look online. I should be able to look at other sources and
Be more convinced of it, right?
right. If anything, it should make your beliefs even stronger if it's true, right?
Yeah.
You can tell, what's real and what's not, but obviously that's not the case, right? You start looking, you see the inconsistencies, it's very credible. Even the churches have his baptism, which is not 1948, it's 1954, right?
Yeah.
Those things, right? You have to do it for yourself. You can't expect your family member who doesn't know as much as you do to do that work for you, right? You have to go into the websites. You have to go into blog spots. It's so important for you to do that work for your own self, because how scary is it that you spent 10 years, 15 years, 20 years in this place, and all they're doing is ripping your soul apart, right? Taking, charge of your finances, your family relationships, your job. Even I've seen people drop out of college for WMSCOG, right? It
Yeah.
changes the whole trajectory of your life. So why not go online? Why not do yourself a favor and make sure that this is genuinely the truth? It's what you want to do with your life.
Can I
And
touch on that?
yeah.
So, have you ever seen The Office?
Yeah.
So there's a scene, and I'm gonna get nerdy, I guess. There's a scene where Michael Scott, who's the branch manager of Dunder Mifflin, it's a paper company, right?
Right.
He finds out that one of his employees is having an affair, right? And so he gets all the gossip, and he's the only one that knows that this is actually taking place. And so he starts spreading a rumor that, oh, this employee's having an affair. This employee's having an affair. And but he feels bad because he kind of thinks for a second. He's like, oh, this might actually really ruin this person's life, and it's not my place to be telling this. So what
Mhm.
he does, he goes around the office and starts spreading a bunch of fake rumors, right? He starts saying like, oh, this person, I mean, I can't think of any examples, but essentially they're spreading fake rumors in order to mask the actual true situation of
Mhm.
what's going on. So I think the WMSCOG kind of works like that, right? So they have the evidence, right? But how do you get rid of these actual evidences that hurt the church? You
Mhm.
create a bunch of fake evidences against the church
Right.
in order to mask what is actually true evidence against the church. So, for instance, they'll say something like, yeah, people, they don't believe on Sung Home because he wore glasses, right? Or they don't believe in Mother because, she fell asleep in service.
Right.
Or they don't believe in Father and Mother because they have children, or something, where it's just like, it doesn't really have any weight. doesn't really have any bearing, right? Like,
Mm.
or some people don't believe in Father Mother because they're Korean, but they believe in Jesus even though he was Jewish, right? So they create all these like fake, rumors in order to mask like, oh, the 4 failed prophecies of the end of the world, or the Suin debacle where An Sang-hong wrote a book where there's no mother, or all these really like heavy hitting evidences to where it's like any normal person would be like, take a double take.
Yeah.
But what they do is they spread all these other fake, for the example, all these other fake rumors to mask the one hard hitting true evidence. So whenever somebody hears like the Suin where he wrote that there's no mother, they automatically consider that as the same level of, oh, people don't believe An Sang-hong because he wore glasses, or they
Mm.
hear, that he, the failed end of the world prophecies. They consider that like, oh, well, people also don't believe in, mother because she fell asleep. So they take these little things that really have no bearing on anything, no merit, and they basically use that to mask the really hard hitting things. So the members register them on the same level,
Yeah.
right? They dismiss them as if they're they're not distinct from each other, but in context, they are totally different. Like me believing An Sang-hong, or not believing An Sang-hong rather because he didn't wear glasses is so different than me not believing Mother because An Sang-hong said, don't believe a female deity. It's a scandalous teaching. It's a unchanging truth of the Church of God, that there is no God the Mother,
Right.
and all the evidences, right? They try to make that like it's the same thing. It's not.
Mm-hmm.
It can't be further from the same thing,
Right.
you know?
And I want to touch on, I want to point out some more inconsistencies. Obviously, there's thousands that I've seen over time, but there's this one video where, right, father, right, An Sang-hong, right, he's getting on a train to go to China, right?
Yeah.
Right. If you look at the facts, there's no trains going to China going through North Korea at that time, right? So those kind
Right.
of inconsistencies you really have to look out for. You have to think like, oh, what? Like they did that? Like, no, they didn't do that. And another thing I want to touch up on is when I left, it was so hard. Right, 3 months, I think I was very numb. Your whole world gets flipped upside down. You don't, especially for me with both parents in it, and none of my friends ever been to the church. Like, there's only so much you could get off your chest about it, right? But what I wanted to say is, I've seen people just get completely bashed. Like, even before I left, like there was a homosexual brother, and he came out to me, and I said, "Brother, it's fine. Like, you're okay. Like, don't worry." But eventually he got excommunicated, and then the leader said like, "Oh, we're gonna have to put him in a spiritual quarantine." Nobody talked to him, right? And I'm like, this guy has been by my side for 5 years now, right? So that really broke my heart, and I realized like, oh, this is what happens when you leave. Like, you're just completely banished. Nobody cares about you anymore, and that's what happens. You get quarantined. They
Yeah.
When I left, I've been called Satan by some of my closest members. I've been called Judas, right? We've had very tough arguments about the Bible, and it would go nowhere, right? And I'm learning too. I'm not perfect. I'm learning what works and doesn't work. What is a better approach, right? So any member that's watching this and they're scared to leave, they're scared of the backlash, don't worry, because I was scared too, but there's a whole community of ex-members out here that are willing to listen to you. Obviously, we're not all healed too, so we also have some inner work to do, but it's not good to keep all those things, you know, in yourself. You want to talk to someone that's been through something similar, right? So just reach out to one of us. Maybe you could put some of my contacts in your
Yeah.
description.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a whole community of people that have been through what you've been through, you know, to some degree. So that will be part of your healing journey. It's been part of mine. So please try to reach out and just talk those feelings out.
Yeah. The pain, the numbness, the fear, the sense of you feel alone and isolated. That is what the cult wants you to feel. That's exactly why they do what they do, is they want you to feel that way because they want you to come back, right? But there are people who have gone through the same thing you have. Tons of us. Like there's a lot more than I ever even imagined that are ex-members. Like
Yeah.
it's
Freaking
crazy. It's shocking.
deaconesses, missionaries.
Pastors, like
Yeah.
it's actually bonkers when you really see, because obviously you're not going to see in there, but
Yeah.
when you actually see who has left, like what ranks and how many, it's crazy the amount. And also come out in your own time too. You don't like there's no like
Yeah.
don't rush anything. Like plan your out. Just you can plan it all, and just take your time.
This
Um,
this is how I plan my departure. I would go every Sabbath in the beginning, right? And then slowly miss like a morning service and then keep two services, right? Really just kind of test the waters, see where I'm at, how I feel about this place. And then eventually start missing a whole Sabbath or a Tuesday service. And then right, they'll say like, oh, that person has some doubts. But then it's not about them. Don't listen to them. Don't let them rebuke you. Think what is good for my life? What is good for my journey?
and your soul.
Yeah, your soul, your job, your family, your spouse, like think about your life first before caring about what they think. It doesn't matter because they will spit you out, like you said. Like they don't care if you leave.
Yeah, and just know, if you are going to come out, there are going to be some things that will happen, right? You will get scared. You will feel alone, and you will probably be rebuked. You will probably be called names. You'll They'll try to pull the Judas, right? You never believed, right? Even though you spent a decade in there, or you gave tithe, or you did the whole thing for a long time. They'll say you never had faith, or they'll say you're a demonist, you love the world, you love the wages of sin, or you're like
Mhm.
Cain, you took the way of Cain, right? He's a murderer, he never really belonged to us. It all happens to every one of us. I'm not Cain, Han's not Demas or Judas, I'm not Satan, he's not Satan. We simply saw what was happening after a long time and made a decision for our soul, for our life, for our family. And it does cost you. It does. That I mean, to say it's not to say it's going to be easy and it's not going to cost you anything. I mean, that's kind of a lie, because it will cost you the community. It will cost you your friends. It will cost you your family in Zion, and most likely you'll never talk to them again
Yeah,
because
and
you're not allowed.
not to offend anyone, but there is a life outside of this church and even Christianity, if that's your thing. Like I'm agnostic now, which might seem like a cop out, but I really believe that as long as I am a good person, I do my best in this life, why would the universe or God, smite me because I couldn't follow like a certain guideline or something, right? Like I can't, I really don't believe God is that, legalistic. I think the true God or the universe will care about your journey and what you've been through and how much you try to live your life to the best, like there is a life outside of this place, even if they make it seem like it's not.
Han, I think it's funny because you're literally describing like normal Christianity.
Oh yeah, you gonna convert?
Huh?
You gonna convert me?
No, I'm not. I'm not in the converting business right now. I
Oh,
left that. I
yeah,
just
I'm
think it's funny.
like,
That's essentially, I'm learning too, right? Like I'm Christian still, but um, I'm learning too, right? Like I don't know everything, but essentially from what I've seen, if you watch my videos, essentially that's it, right? God wants you to be a good person. God wants you to take care of people. God wants you to take care of your family. God wants you to take care of yourself. You're made for the glory of God.
Right.
And God knows you'll fall short. God knows you're not perfect. God knows that you will have flaws. You will have, you know, you will not make it. That's why Jesus died, so that way he can give grace to you and me, because we will not be perfect. It's impossible. It's not something we can achieve. And that is why there is grace, because through Jesus, we are cleansed of our sins. We have salvation through faith in Jesus, right? There is no standard that you have to meet, because God's standards are something we could never meet, and he knows that, like you said. So you basically just described Christianity.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, I do want to say one thing that really helped me get out was right. WMSCOG is very rigid. Right, you have to keep these laws to be saved, and then you have to keep all these other laws to be saved. And I kept thinking, like, how does this prove my character other than obedience? You know, right? I just gotta keep these appointed times, and I'm good enough. Like, it didn't make sense to me. Like, there's so much more good that I could do in my life other than just sitting down and eating bread and wine every year and doing this and that. Like,
that's the whole point. That's what the Pharisees did, right? That's what the Pharisees taught. Just do these regulations, you're good. Doesn't
yeah.
matter about the inside, right? It doesn't matter about how you are, what good you could have done. Just do these regulations. But
Mhm.
Jesus came and totally broke it. He said, no, these regulations, they're it's put in place to show that you can't be saved by yourself. You are incapable of being good. You're incapable of saving yourself,
Mm.
right? But I'm going to save you for free, because while we were enemies of God, sinners, Jesus came and died for us. And now all he wants us to do is help others, serve others, take care of others, help the sinful to become, to receive the grace that we receive freely, to
Yeah.
help those in need, to give to the poor, to help the widows, to help the orphans, to help people. That was his whole concept. Not
Mhm.
these regulations and these, oh, if you don't miss Passover, if you miss Passover, you're going to hell, or you don't tithe, you're going to hell. That is not the gospel in the New Testament.
Yeah.
That is not what it is. And I want people to know that, because I think part of why I'm saying this too is a lot of, and maybe we'll wrap this up here, but part of the reason why some members have a hard time leaving is because I used to say this very thing too. What's the alternative? Right? That's why I created my YouTube channel,
Yeah.
Finding the Alternative, because I take you on my step-by-step journey of course, dissecting the WMSCOG and just examining it through scripture and evidence, but also finding out what is the alternative, what else is out there, what else could be true, what else could be, I guess, salvation, or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
But I think a big part of it is creating that alternative, right? And having the facts and the knowledge to back up what the alternative is.
Mm.
Um, and so that's why I'm bringing these things up, because if the members don't know, right? Because if let's say your family is atheist, right? Which I'm not going to judge anyone, right? But to someone who's in the WSCOG, they can't fathom that alternative, right? Being in the WMSCOG, you can't fathom being an atheist, right? Because they have built up God. They have, I mean, of course, it's a fake God, it's a false God, but you get the point I'm trying to make.
Mhm.
They, and something that I always had to say, and I'm sure many members say it too, is like, oh, well, who else, right? Or what else is there? Who else is there? Where can I go? What's the alternative, right? And so I think having a alternative and being able to present said alternative is very key, because some people don't leave because they don't know where else to go. They don't know what else to do. They want to believe in God, and maybe they don't want to take the agnostic or the atheist route, which is fine, right? Like, everyone has their right to do what they want. But I think as a WSCOG member, at least in the beginning, that's just not something that they can fathom, if that makes sense.
And
Um,
you don't have to just find a place right after you leave. Focus on your
True.
friends, focus on your hobbies, focus on your life. That is church too, you know?
Thank you for joining the call, Han, and I hope that this can be beneficial to family members who may have, their siblings, their spouses or their parents in the church. And I hope this can be helpful for even members who are just, maybe they're down on their luck. They're, they just don't feel like it's right anymore, and they just need that little, that little push in the right direction.
Yeah.
Or even ex-members. I think ex-members, us just telling our story, just thinking through it, processing it, and just talking about it and just getting it out there. I think it's part of the healing process too.
This is
And
really healing for me. I really appreciate you doing this too. Like, obviously, like it's hard to talk about it, but it's super good for me. So I appreciate you.
of course. And yeah, best of luck with everything you got going on. And Han's going to leave his information in the description below. Obviously, my information will be on the channel, and I'll leave it in the description below. So if you need to reach out for anything, if you have any questions, any concerns, please feel free to reach out to both of us. And we're just here to help, and we're here to answer questions. We're here to guide you in the right direction. Or even if you're a member and you're a solid member and you're just like, I'm never going to leave, but you need someone to just talk to that knows what you've gone through and knows what what you're, just talk to us, right? Like, we're not going to bite you. We're not Satan. We're not going to possess you or put a spell on you or something. If you just want to vent, just vent to us, right? I'm not going to try and take you out of the church. I won't even bring up the church if you don't want me to. But if you just want to talk to somebody and just vent, go for it. Like, I'm here, Han's here. We'll be here. So, open invitation. So again, thanks for joining the call with us, and yeah, God bless everybody, and I hope everyone the best of luck.
All right.